In order to start the construction, I'm first going to be making a template that I'm going to be using on a router later on. Since it's just a template, I'm using a 1/2 inch plywood and cutting it on my table saw. Here I'm drawing some lines on that plywood that I just cut, and I'll talk about the measurements in just a second. I printed out my SketchUp design with the dimensions. So I see that I need to start with a rectangular piece that is 11 inches high and 18 3/4 inches wide. So I have this piece over here. My steps are designed 6 1/4 deep and 5 inches high each step. So what I did is I went ahead and marked those steps over here, not only on one side, but I also did it on the other side, so that it's easy to cut with my bandsaw. So now at the bandsaw, I'm making use of my bandsaw fence and even freehanded to cut basically straight on those 3 lines that I have, the 3 step lines. At the end, what I'm trying to achieve here is basically a 3-step shape for the 3 layers. Since I have a semicircle shape on a couple of those steps, I am using this scrap wood and using my router, which has a sort of a circling jig at the bottom, and I'm making a hole of the required diameter. Once I have that hole, I take that piece, cut it into half, so I get a semicircle shape, and here I'm transferring that semicircle shape onto my 3-step vertical stand. I'm making some rough cut on my bandsaw, and then I move on to my router table. What I'm doing here is taking that semicircle template that I just did, using some blue tape and attaching blue tape to blue tape with super glue. That way that template sticks, and I'm now doing fine routing, fine shaping with my router and transferring that semicircle exactly onto my template. Basically using a template to shape the bigger template. Doing the same on the top again, stuck it with the blue tape and super glue and transferring the semicircle on the top. Now you see here the template is ready. The semicircle is perfectly transferred, and I also have a little notch on that bottom over there. So my entire template for the vertical stand is at this time ready. I move on to make the horizontal support or slat, which has an arch on the bottom. I'm using the 3 nail and 2 sticks method. It's a pretty popular method to make the arch. You have a nail on the top and 2 nails on the left and right. You have 2 sticks, 1 parallel and 1 sitting on the 2 nails. And I glue the 2 sticks, use the vertex, basically the intersection, and drag my pencil like you see, and that makes the arch on either side. Then I take that piece, bring it to my bandsaw, use that line that I made, the arch, and then cut it up. Sand it, and that's my template ready. Then I move on to make the platform in which the pop sticks will actually go in. I have a couple of 3/4 inch plywood with cut to a little bit more than what I need in length and width. It's glued and clamped. Then I fine-tune the width on my table saw, all of them together. And then move on to my miter saw to cut to length on one side, and then here I am cutting the other side, cut to the length I need. So this is going to give me the final platform. I use my pencil and sort of a T square kind of thing to mark the exact locations where the holes will go in. I use a hole punch or a punch hole. These things are pretty useful to mark the exact position where the drill bit can go in. I use my drill guide, a little platform, benchtop drill guide, to drill a hole about 1/2 inch deep, and the diameter should be enough to put the pop stick in. A little bit of sanding, a little bit of checking with a sample pop stick. I use clamps to clamp the bolts together and sort of gang sand them together on the sides. Then I move the boards to the router to give a little bit of shape on one side, a concave shape and a convex shape. At this point, the platforms are ready. I move on, take larger 1/2 inch good quality plywood and start transferring my template onto them. I can make 2 out of the large. Make a rough cut. Those are the 2 stands. Go to my bandsaw. I start cutting out big pieces, basically rough cutting them so that I don't have to cut all of it on my router. Once I have the rough cut pieces, I move on to my router. Here again, I'm using painter's tape and super glue and sticking them together basically. And then I start using my router flush bit and start transferring the template onto the final piece of plywood. Once it's transferred, once it's all flush cut, it's time to take those pieces apart, and now I have the stand ready. I follow the same process for the horizontal support. Stick my template, do some rough cuts on my bandsaw, and then move on to my router for the fine cut. At this point, I have all the vertical support as well as the horizontal supports ready. I start using my pocket hole jig, Kreg jig, to put in some holes for the pocket screws. I do that on both the horizontal supports as well as the vertical supports like shown here. And I'll show just in a little bit the location of the pocket holes and screws and how it all comes together. The last step was a little bit of tricky. I had to use a scrap wood to put the pocket holes in. So here's the final assembly. You can see the vertical stand as well as the horizontal, let's say the support or the slat coming all together. Here's a little bit more information of the dry assembly. The top slat is 2 inches from the edge, from the back edge. The bottom slat is 3 inches from the back edge. And if I move around and come to the front slat that's on the top, that's 4 inches from the edge, the tip edge over there. I start putting in the pocket screws everywhere. This DeWalt right angle attachment was pretty useful for this. And once all the screws are in, I take the clamps off, and that's the assembled piece, the stand itself. I start painting my project, starting with the platform pieces. The client specifically provided me the paint, but this project can be either painted or stained to whatever color of choice. I go ahead and paint the stand itself too. On second thoughts, I should have painted the individual pieces before assembly. The paint sometimes gets stuck in the hole, so I drill the holes out again and check with the test stick. Once the painting is done, it's time for the final assembly. I start with the very top platform, screw it in. And then move on to the second step, leaving equal distance or equal parts hanging out on both sides. And then the third. And that finishes the entire assembly.